Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Therapists. For this episode, I'm very pleased to welcome Margot Borden. Margot is an experienced therapist, and we're very excited to hear what she has to say about a variety of topics involving spirituality, psychology, and overall well-being. So welcome to the show, Margot.
Thank you, Ben. It's good to be here. Delighted.
Yeah, great to have you. So we've got a great list of questions here, and we really want to find out from you about all of them. So let's get right to it. Our first question for you today is, what do spirituality and psychology have to do with each other?
Okay, so psychology is really how does the mind function, and spirituality is about the soul. The innermost light, the essence of your being. And so psychology, like going into the mind, not just the outer mind, the beliefs, but the innermost functioning, the emotions, the psyche, it helps us to understand and navigate through the mind home to the soul. So for me, psychology is the road home to the soul. So it is spiritual, essentially, as long as we don't stop at a finite definition of who we are, because then we limit our potential. So when the more we open into the inner functioning of the mind, the more I want to use the word psyche because it's more of a larger definition, we start to see the limitations, the rigidities, the ways where we align with our potential and the ways where we forsake our potential, and we learn to navigate differently until it all becomes open and fluid, and it's like we pave the way to walk down into the soul, which is the innermost part of our being.
It sounds amazing. It sounds like a journey that maybe a lot of people haven't yet encountered in their lives.
Yeah, I think many people sense that there's more to them, that there's an inner longing, or there are intuitive experiences or premonitions or kind of non-ordinary experiences. So they have hints that something's there, and we can either turn away from those hints, or we can shun them, or we can not know how to listen to them, or we can listen and open and explore and almost treat them as light posts, that are lighting our way home. And that's really what my work involves, is treating those all those experiences, those inklings, those spiritual longings, the sense that I am more, the sense that the kind of the sense sometimes we can get of being pure, of being whole, but then we get caught up in life and in our limitations, and we forget. But to come back to the essence of who we are.
Yeah. When it comes to these longings, I think a question that may come up is, well, if let's say life has rules and structure and obligations, and then there's also the longings that we have. And maybe some people are brought up to say, well, your job is, or what you should be doing with your time is meeting the expectations and the discipline, the things that you need to be doing, as opposed to the longings that you feel. And I imagine a lot of your work has to do with figuring out which of those two values does one respond to.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting topic, which is either or thinking, which comes from the left brain, which is logical and linear, and as opposed to the right brain, which is holistic and sees the bigger picture, and it's more inclusive and more. And so that in the right brain, which is we think in terms of both and, not either or. And both and thinking is extremely rare. I find when whatever I'm reading or encountering, we're mostly in kind of this limited either or. Either I do what I have to do to survive and fulfill my obligations, or my parents, society, my partner, my kids, whatever, or I listen to myself and become Buddha and leave everything else behind. No, it's both and. What happens if we find and align to our innermost essence, to our greater potential, to those deepest longings, and find a way to stay aligned to that while going about my actions in the world? And imagine how our actions in the world will resonate at a different level, and that what we give to the world becomes more whole and more wholesome and more meaningful, and how that can not only affect us, but it affects everyone around us. And as therapists, it affects our clients. It's far stretching. It's infinite.
Wow. Is there something that you tell your clients? Because I imagine, as a therapist, one has to believe that one can integrate and thinking into their lives and move away from the either or thinking, that's part of what one must believe to believe that their clients can get somewhere. What do you do to try and get your clients to move along that shift?
So belief is of the mind. It's I believe this, and faith is of the heart. So I show them the way through sometimes just through experience. I believe that any change or transformation doesn't happen through thinking. It happens through the feeling, the inner ways of knowing. And so I use ways of bringing people down, introducing them to themselves at the level of heart, at the level of body, and opening and expanding into the greater and greater depths, which is again the light posts into your greater potential. So bringing you into the felt experience, a different way of knowing that feels a lot more authentic than the flatlining methods of the mind, which seem so real but are very finite.
Yeah, I like to compare the mind. It's like, certainly when it's like in the either or, it's like a tennis volley or ping pong or any of those things, and it's just hitting back and forth and back and forth. And if you ever watch tennis, tennis goes on forever. Like, you can watch like one of those closely matched tennis matches, and it's like Sampras and Agassi or whatever, and it just they never end. And I think that's kind of like what goes on in the mind. It goes on. It doesn't go too far. And at some point, just someone gets tired and it ends, or someone makes an unforced error, which I think could also be attributed to the mind. And I was going to say, Margot.
The mind is one way of knowing, and the heart and the gut are yet other ways. And the mind is finite, and it helps us, but the heart is infinite. And not only is the heart, because the personal heart, it's actually been scientifically measured by the HeartMath Institute, that the heart is, it connects to the world heart. So that when I connect into my heart, I connect to the world heart and the soul of the universe and all of nature. And then the mind is there to put words on it and convey it and understand it. But the mind is finite, and yet it's all encompassing and very distracting. And so we can just spend our lives trying to, sort out the mind or live in the mind. But when we open into the heart, we open into a different way of knowing that is felt and like inner revelation, as opposed to thought, which is unidimensional.
Mark, we're talking about balance, and think a lot of people would describe themselves as sensitive, or that others have told them that they're too sensitive. First of all, is that such a thing, and how does that relate to balance?
Okay, so there's a lot of talk today about being an HSP, highly sensitive person, or an empath. And I find that growing up as an empath, which I happen to be, is a difficult thing because you're in a feeling intuitive world, universe, and you're trying to navigate in a world that identifies with logical, linear, scientific ways of thinking and doing. And so highly sensitive people and empaths, when we don't recognize that that's what we are, that we're actually probably mostly right brain dominant, and we're subject to bullying and judgment. You're too sensitive, and so um, there are so working with being a highly sensitive person to, first of all, recognize that it doesn't mean you're lesser, even though people will criticize and bully and all that. To recognize it as a gift and to learn how to harness it as a gift. And some of that involves developing, strengths as to how to manage being so sensitive, going out into nature, various forms of self-care. But the biggest thing and the first thing is to reframe our mindset, because too many empaths and highly sensitive people come to me believing that because they were different, they were wrong, and that there's something wrong with them. And it's on the contrary, there's something right with them, and they just have to reframe it and turn it into a strength. So that's a huge topic. There's many books, and actually my next book is going to be on living a life as an empath. It should be out next year.
Oh, very cool. Well, we look forward to that. I imagine also you know, different people would need different things. Like I was just thinking, like recently I joined the pool, and it's been like life changing because, like, I guess it was something that I really needed. And I think maybe different sensitive people might have different things that they need. But I would say to myself, you going to the pool, you should be able to get along without it. Don't spoil yourself. It's a luxury. But now it's like my thinking is, well, maybe other people don't need it. I do. And then maybe other people do other things for themselves that they need. This is the thing in my diet or self-care that I happen to need. And then that's okay.
Absolutely. And it's an exercise, especially for a highly sensitive person. It puts you in your body, it structures the body, and it helps us embody all of the input that we get a lot more input than someone who's not highly sensitive. And so it gives you a way of holding and structuring all of the inputs from being highly sensitive. So yeah,
Yeah.
very healthy to need and to want to exercise. And the reason I was smiling at the beginning when you mentioned pool is because during the lockdown, that was my lifeline. I swam a kilometer a day, and I was never a swimmer. I found it boring and repetitive. But during lockdown, it became like it was the highlight of my day. Jump in the pool and swim a kilometer. It was like, yes,
Yeah.
it's so good for the body, mind, and soul.
That effective psychotherapy doesn't look at the why, but it looks at the how. So tell us more about that.
So imagine you come to me with, like, I don't know, I freeze up during exams, or whatever, anything. And you rack your brains to try to find out why. First of all, you may or may not, depending on how deeply buried in your subconscious mind it is, you may never know. And you may know. How does that help? What does that change? Okay, I had a little school trauma when I was, 5 years old or something, but that does not liberate you to choose to experience exams in a more empowered way. So, and also sometimes looking at why is a form of self-pummeling. Why am I this way? I have to figure it out. I have to get to the bottom of it. I should know what I'm, you know. And so self-pummeling is extremely common. I think you'll agree with me as a colleague, and it's pernicious and it hides itself in funny ways. But so finding out why, or seeking to find out why, can again be a form of self-pummeling, and also does not liberate us from the pattern at hand. And so the how is, where do I go from here? How do I rewrite this? And sometimes doing inner work, which is my passion and my specialty, as we liberate the pattern, we'll see a scene. And the scene is how it got there. But we don't seek to find out how.
I think that's very different than how people might think of psychotherapy, where, and I've heard people who express a lot of fear. They say, well, I don't want to go to therapy because I'm going to find out that somebody did something to me when I was a child, and what's that going to do? Which essentially is validating your approach, which is saying, exactly, that's not what we're aiming at.
Right. Although finding out what happened to you in childhood, the storyline renders us passive and powerless. And most of the time when we experience trauma, especially early trauma, we are passive and powerless. And so when that trauma gets triggered as adults, we go into this assumption that we're passive and powerless. Whereas on the contrary, if we encounter an early life trauma, disappointment, betrayal, whatever it might be, in therapy, we want to veer away from the storyline and down into the heart, to the feelings, because that's where the wounding is. And when we tend to the feelings that kind of have a hold on us, it liberates the feelings, and we reclaim who we were before the trauma. We reclaim the part of ourselves that got locked into the trauma. And so we should absolutely not feel ashamed or afraid of discovering what happened to us, because it is the path to liberation. But we shouldn't look for what happened. We should look for the path to liberation. The focus is on freeing ourselves to become who we truly are. Reclaiming our power, reclaiming our authenticity, reclaiming our love, the ability to give and receive love freely. So that brings us to the topic of shame, which we can actually focus in on. Shame is a tremendous barrier to therapy. And the truth is, there is nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm going to say that again. The truth is, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We're all imperfect beings, limping our way through life. And we can do that, with self-condemnation and judgment, and, lock ourselves in a room and never go out or do anything. Or we can embrace our imperfections and laugh and play with them, and recognize that whatever we did when we were young or in the past, especially if it's a source of shame, we didn't do it on purpose. We did the best we could at the time we did it. And again, life is an imperfect science. And so coming to terms with shame and releasing our shame is key to being able to see ourselves as we are. Because if there's too much shame and too much judgment, seeing ourselves as we are, there's too much at stake, and it becomes arduous. But if we can release that, and there are ways of doing that, and including just hearing my words, which is like, oh yeah, I don't have to do this to myself. We start to be able to see ourselves just as we are, without judgment. And then we can start to do anything. There's nothing we can't do if we're willing to go there in ourselves. There's nothing that can't be healed, nothing that can't be liberated and healed.
Wow. Does it matter, like, I imagine that there's different levels of shame that people carry, and some carry heavier burdens of shame than others, and then the process could go in very different ways.
Yeah, and it might involve acknowledging our wrongs. If the shame is, there's inner shame, I'm ashamed at myself, and then there's shame at my actions and my words, and no matter where our shame lies in our being, self-forgiveness, apology to ourselves, to others, whether it's through visualizing it or writing it or speaking with people who we feel we've wronged, we can liberate our shame and become free, no matter what it is. And taking ownership sometimes when it comes to actions that we're ashamed of. There's a methodology for taking ownership for what I've done and apologizing, not just saying I'm sorry. There's a kind of a deep and soulful and whole way of actually liberating the feeling of shame.
Right. I think you can meet different people who, when they take ownership over what they did, it brings you closer. And then there are other people who you get a sense that they might be saying I'm sorry because they want the interaction to kind of end, but they don't necessarily have a grasp, and that those are two different ways of when you encounter the word sorry.
Yeah. But it does lead to either closure of the incident, of what happened, or closure of and like closure of a relationship.
Yeah.
And closure is key. The key is to be at peace with ourselves, and so apology and forgiveness are key when we're ready and in the way that is wholesome for us. We can't forsake ourselves or give our power away or allow someone to continue to step on our boundaries or abuse us. So apology has to be from the depths of the heart and soul, and forgiveness, it's not a whimsical thing.
Often someone might be told that in their quest for well-being, one should listen to themselves. And if someone's listening to what's going on in their head and their thinking part, sometimes there may be lots of stimuli which are not very easy to take apart. But then someone might also say, listen to your body. And is that, they might say, well, is that just being aware of the aches and pains and my craving for lunch, or the rumbling of what I just ate? Is my shirt itchy? So obviously there's something deeper going on. When you say listen to your body, what are you thinking of, and what do you want for your clients?
So actually that brings up an interesting topic, that we can listen to the mind or the body or the heart, or ideally all three. The mind tends to detach itself from the deeper ways of knowing and being in the heart and the body. And we can often, there's something that I call taking refuge in our mind, that when we don't feel safe in our bodies, we fly up into the mind and we're in fear and doubt. And so it never leads to resolution. It leads to rumination. So listening to the mind is a tricky thing. Now, there are deeper ways and more embodied ways of being and knowing, as you say, and the heart also is it has its whims, and so it's almost like a new way of intelligence, knowing how to listen to the heart, because it's not that fleeting emotion about the guy I have a crush on, or watching a particular movie. So we learn how to listen to the heart, and we can learn how to listen to the body. So the body has physical as a physical dimension, but it also has an emotional dimension, and it actually has been scientifically proven that those subtle sensations, the visceral sensations in the body, are more closely related to the subconscious mind than the conscious mind. So I feel something in my heart when I think of something, or if I think of going to a particular place, I feel like, a feeling, or I'm talking to a particular person and I'm feeling discordant energies. Maybe the conversation is light and there's no reason, but I'm feeling discord between me and that person. So learning to listen to the body starts with listening to those sensations and putting words on them, putting meaning on them. And listening to the body is infinite because it opens way to the deeper and deeper levels of the self. So we start at listening to the emotions expressing themselves through the body, a lump in the throat, or my heart feels blocked, or I feel open, I feel connected, and then it opens the way to deeper and deeper levels of awareness, and all of the levels we can learn to put words on and communicate them. And that's what the purpose of the mind is to help us organize and convey what's going on. But it is not the summit of our way of being and knowing. It's a tool.
Feels like it's not. So what would you say to somebody who is hearing all of this now and they're thinking to themselves, am I doing any of this? Maybe they're already doing some of this, that even though maybe we never thought of what we're doing in those terms and we have a lot to learn, that we are already on some level listening to our heart and listening to our bodies.
Yeah, I think most people have those visceral sensations that indicate something's going on. There are some people who don't, who've been so traumatized or so wounded that we cut off from the body. We don't feel safe, we dissociate, or we just write off the body's wisdom and intelligence. But most of us do, and so just hearing this map of consciousness that I've been laying out in today's talk will hopefully validate those inner ways of being and knowing, of the body, of the heart, of the intuition, and recognizing the mind is a wonderful tool, but it is not the be-all and end-all of who we are. It's there to help us put it into words, put meaning on it. But it's the deeper. It shouldn't stop us from being in touch with the deeper ways of the body, the mind, of the body and the heart and the soul, which is expressed in intuition.
So in American society today, or as an American, wherever an American might live, or if we expand it to a Western way of being, there are so many ways that one can kind of depart from the sensations that you're feeling. If I'm driving down pretty much anywhere, I can just stop at Starbucks and make that my new focus. The coffee, the latte. I can put the radio on in the car. If I'm doing some work on the computer, I can always open up multiple tabs and pick my distraction of choice. So what are your opinions, and do you have any kind of practical opinions about how one navigates a world that's basically given us an endless buffet of ways to avoid, or at the very least delay, the attention that's required to go on this journey?
Yeah. So I think life sometimes gives us, stingers like tragedy, loss, and at those moments, we put everything in perspective and we start to realize what's really important. And why can't we live like that? And again, living without shame, without self-judgment, cultivating our radical self-acceptance takes the arduousness, some of the arduousness out of the inner journey, because it is arduous. But it doesn't need to be a journey of self-pummeling and self-judgment. So I think just, keeping the big questions in mind, someday I'm going to be sick, or I'm going to die, or I'm going to lose a loved one. And how do I want to live my life? What's important? Who am I? What's really important? What am I here for? What will make my life meaningful and fulfilling? I think it's important to keep our focus on the important questions with curiosity, not with pressure to find the answer. It's an ongoing path of self-discovery, and to be aware and to use screens and other distractions and addictions, with awareness and empowerment, not give in to our compulsions. So who's in the driver's seat of the car? Is it my fear? Is it my doubt? Is it my impulses? Is it my distraction? Or is it my heart and soul and body and my conscious choice to engage in this life and make it meaningful and fulfilling for myself and for the world?
Yeah.
So it's a question of choice, and awareness helps us empowers us to make those choices.
Yeah, I think the way I see modern life in some ways is that we are living now, basically, we are always in the mall, at the very least. Like, we're never not in the mall, unless you really go to the woods and turn your phone off. But short of that, we're always in the mall, and then with WhatsApp, you are also always hanging out. And to go about life with a certain level of seriousness and focus now has to be done, but you're inside the mall. And so it's a certain different kind of reality that people are facing today.
Yeah. There are so many distractions and so many things leading us to believe that life is other than the deep and meaningful, the bottom line stuff that's important. And it doesn't have to be serious. It can be joyful. It can be playful. It can be curiosity. But to definitely use, engage in outer life with a sense of discrimination of, what's really important. How am I spending my time? What is my mind focused on? What is my heart focused on? How am I behaving? Is what I'm doing and thinking leading to well-being of myself and others, or am I contributing to, just distraction or worse, to hatred or divisiveness? We have to live our lives consciously and aligned with, our heart and soul and our wisdom, the deeper and inner ways of knowing. And it's a choice, and it's not an easy choice, and it's a choice that we have. It involves having to learn how to do these things that we are not taught, because it's there's so many distractions telling us that our life is meant for, other things that are out there, and ultimately, in my book, not. They're great, and we should enjoy what's out there, but we shouldn't become distracted and make ourselves believe that it's the ultimate purpose of our lives.
Well, thank you, Margot. We've reached the end of the time. This has been enlightening and truly an arduous but rewarding journey. I think awaits anyone who's listening to this episode, and but hopefully inspired to take on the journey and to take those steps towards all the things that you mentioned.
Thank you, Ben. It's been really wonderful having this discussion with you, because a good interviewer knows how to bring out the depths and breadths of the person they're interviewing. And I feel like you've really done that today. And I hope everyone listening gets benefit and some insights from this talk. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. So for anyone who's listening, if you look in the description of this video, you'll see a link to Margot's website where you can read more about what she does, publications she's done, and just anything about her therapy practice. So make sure to take a look there as well.